Israel needs to be stopped before they continue this horrific onslaught, Piers.
This is war. In war, people die. Abby does not have the authority. She's just a self-appointed, low-grade journalist.
You're a spy for Israeli intelligence.
Do you agree with the principle that Palestinians should be entitled to exactly the same human rights as Israelis?
Israel is fighting for its very existence. Whatever it costs, we want to remove Hamas from power.
Okay, I understand that. That's a different question. My point is, why...
Do you?
About Hamas, I reject the premise of Israel's genocide. I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, Hamas is a terrorist organization and they need to be eradicated. Of course, that's not true. And I think that we can both agree
what do you mean that's not
it's
true?
An impossible task. It's not true that something needs to be done about Hamas. I don't agree with that framework and the parameters of that debate.
Just keep repeating ethnic cleansing, genocide, colonialism, etc. None of it is real, including Palestine. It's only in your head. None of it is existential. Palestine was never born. How can you free it? It was never there. It's just a colonial entity. And this parrot has been just repeating Hamas propaganda. She's been there only for a visit, and maybe she had some falafel sandwich, and she really was blown away of the Palestinian experience. There is no such a thing as Palestine. It's about time to retire, find a different job. You're not a journalist. You don't qualify even to be a mother.
Piers Morgan referees a no-holds-barred clash between Abi Martin and the son of Hamas's founder, Mosab Hassan over the Israel-Palestine conflict. This white-hot debate ignites with accusations of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and propaganda flying like shrapnel. Watch as Abi paints a horrifying picture of Israeli atrocities, while Youssef counters with claims of Hamas barbarism and Palestinian non-existence. From contested death tolls to disputed historical narratives, this interview rips open the raw wounds of a decades-long conflict. Prepare for a gut-wrenching journey through allegations of mass graves, AI-targeted strikes, and proposals that will leave you questioning the very nature of humanity in wartime.
Well, I'm joined now by the pro-Palestine journalist and commentator, Abi Martin, and by Mosab Hassan, the son of Hamas's founder and former leader, author of a new book, From Hamas to America. Welcome back to both of you. Abi Martin, I found that, I've got to say, a quite extraordinary interview. To be an official government spokesman and admit you have no idea how many civilians you've killed, whilst trying to simultaneously compare yourself favourably to other civilian death ratios in war, seemed to me staggering.
Indeed. I mean, especially since we have seen the comparison as the dust has been settling real time on our phones. We see Israel has committed, in fact, some of the most heinous war crimes in modern history, Piers. And as we're seeing the invasion now of Rafah, cutting off the last vestige of escape for Palestinians, the last vestige of aid delivery, 1.3 million Palestinians, including 600,000 children, with nowhere left to go. This is what Palestinians were told was a safe corridor. That is why they all fled to Rafah. Rafah has been bombarded for the last several weeks, killing dozens of people every day. So I think at this point, 6 months into a genocide, to be deliberating whether or not Israel should continue with this onslaught, this military operation that will result in mass slaughter to continue their ethnic cleansing of Gaza is frankly absurd, patently so, considering what we've seen them do just in the last several weeks, Piers. Evidence of summary executions of doctors, evidence of mass graves, hundreds of bodies bound, dozens of men, women, and children bound. Evidence, according to the UN, of Palestinians buried alive, using drones to lure out Palestinians with sounds of crying children so they could be shot and killed. I mean, this is unparalleled in modern history, actually. And the devastation that's occurred in the Gaza Strip, according to the UN, will take 80 years to rebuild without conditions. So at this point, Israel needs to be stopped before they continue this horrific onslaught, Piers.
Abi's language is a masterclass in emotional manipulation. She speaks of ethnic cleansing and genocide with the casual ease of someone discussing the weather. Her litany of alleged atrocities, executions of doctors, mass graves, Palestinians buried alive, the use of drones to lure out civilians with the sounds of crying children. These are accusations that, if true, would indeed be unparalleled in modern history. But where is the evidence? Where are the international investigations to corroborate these claims?
So who said that Israel is only responsible for the killing of Gazans? Mostly Hamas responsible. First of all, for taking human shields. Second, their booby traps. How could you differentiate the death that it was caused by an airstrike or by a Hamas death trap? How do we know the difference?
Well, yeah, but
In
the point I
war,
would make,
people
though,
die.
Yeah, but
Listen to me. All this moral, Pierce. No, listen to me. All this dilemma. You're going with your whatever morality. This is war. In war, people die. You need to wake up to this reality. Accept it. Stop this denial. We are in the face of savages who hijacked an entire society. This is a very difficult war. No other army can do the job, and I'm not willing to risk thousands of lives of foot soldiers to deal with this type of savages who hijacked the entire society. 100,000 people could have died. Israel is doing everything they could. Don't reduce it to the point, do you have statistics? Who cares?
Well, actually,
Egypt,
no, I think you're missing my point.
Authority,
yeah, Mossad.
Jordan,
all right.
The Arab world don't want Hamas at whatever cost.
Mossad.
Whatever it costs, we want to remove Hamas from power.
Okay, I understand that. That's a different question. My point is why...
Do you?
Well, why does... My question is this for you. Why is it that, if, as you say, Israel has no way of working out who's being killed here, and I know all about war... My brother served in wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. My brother-in-law served in wars. My grandfather served in wars. My uncle served in wars. I don't need a lecture about what warfare is, but I do find it surprising that Israel's official spokesman, months and months into this war, is able to tell me immediately how many Hamas terrorists have been killed by Israeli forces, but admits he hasn't got a clue how many civilians have been killed. And I'm sorry, I think most viewers will find that stunning. You say Israel's no way of checking, but they seem to have a way of checking how many Hamas they're killing, Mossab.
Listen, it's Israel's responsibility to know the death of their own citizens. This is their responsibility. I think your question was absurd. This is why you put him on the spot. He was not prepared for it.
I didn't put him on the spot.
But this is not going to change the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground, Hamas must go. The only side want Hamas to stay is the Iranian Ayatollah, and for some stupid reason, Karen in America wants Hamas to stay. But the Arab world, let me tell you something, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the majority of the Arab world, we are Arabs. I am Arab. We are not Palestinians. We don't want Hamas. We don't want Islam. We want Islamists out of power.
Okay.
It's as simple as that.
All right.
They have been killing Jewish and Arab children. Right. This is not your game. This is not her game. It's not about statistics.
Well, it's not a game.
It's about doing the correct thing of removing Hamas from power.
Youssef's assertion that in war people die is a sledgehammer of reality, shattering the delicate sensibilities of those who'd prefer to view conflict through rose-tinted glasses. However, his dismissal of civilian casualty statistics is particularly agitating. Who cares, he asks. But in doing so, doesn't he inadvertently highlight the very issue at hand, the value placed on human life in this conflict?
Let me interrupt, because you quoted Saudi Arabia in your rant there. So let me read you a statement from the Saudi Foreign Ministry. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs expresses the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's warning of the dangers of the Israeli occupation forces targeting the city of Rafah as part of its systematic bloody campaign to storm all areas of Gaza Strip and displace its residents towards the unknown in light of a lack of safe zones after the massive destruction caused by the Israeli war machine. The ministry affirms the kingdom's categorical rejection of the occupation forces' continued blatant violations of international resolutions, calling for the cessation of these massacres and their violation violation of international law and international humanitarian law without deterrence, which exacerbates the humanitarian crisis and limits international peace efforts. The ministry renewed the kingdom's demand for the international community to intervene immediately to stop the genocide carried out by occupation forces against defenseless civilians in the occupied Palestinian territories. So when you say all Arabs agree with you, Mossab, actually they don't. That is the Saudi Foreign Ministry saying they want it to stop right now.
As we speak, the intelligence services of the Arab world, all of them in a joint operation room with Israel to rid of Hamas. I don't care about some politician trying to make a political statement. It's false. The reality on the ground, we don't want Hamas. We don't want Islamists. We don't want this anarchy, this revolution without a moral compass. We don't want to globalize it. We don't want to bring it to the United States. The game is over. Hamas is out and their death warranty has been issued. It's a finished job.
All right,
and we are going into Rafah and we are going to eliminate every last one of them.
Let me bring in Abby. Abby, you've been listening to this. I mean, fundamentally, I understand why Israel and Israelis want to eliminate Hamas completely, because this is a terror group who are wedded to the eradication of Israel and everybody in it. In fact, they have reiterated publicly through their official spokesman a desire to commit as many October the 7th as they can. So I completely understand why Israel wants to get rid of these terrorists. The question is, how do they do that without killing many, many more civilians? And as we saw from the Saudi statement, there are many Arab countries now in the region increasingly concerned that if there is a full attack on Rafah, which has 1.5 million people, a lot of civilians are going to die.
Right, and you know, to your point before, I think the death toll is actually vastly undercounted, considering how we have not even began to excavate the bodies under the rubble. So I would say that the death toll is a vast undercount. As far as Mossab's point about Hamas, I think that, you know, Mosab is the Palestinian who hates Palestinians. He's developed a lucrative career being able to lie about basic facts about this conflict. And so when he says Palestinians or Hamas, what he really means is all Arabs and all Muslims. In fact, I've seen that plain as day in his social media and talks. He thinks that all Muslims are terrorists. And so, I mean, this is credited to the point that he is actually credited to jailing what is called the Mandela, the Palestinian Mandela.
Youssef detonates Arab unity, claiming he knows of secret Hamas hunting alliances between Israel and the Arabs. Abiy tortures Youssef's credibility, branding him a traitor to Palestinians, accusing him of profiting from lies. She warns of a hidden death toll beneath Gaza's rubble. Death tolls skyrocket. Bodies rot under rubble. Reports confirm 40,000 dead Palestinians, mostly women and children. Is this genocide or necessary evil?
Marwan Barghouti, this is a guy who he put in prison 20 years ago, who was marching side by side with Israeli peace activists denouncing Hamas killing civilians. So again, I mean, when we're looking at someone who's worked for Israeli intelligence, who spouts the same rhetoric as Israelis, who say Hamas, but what they really mean is all Palestinians, I mean, it's really hard to debate someone on the fundamental reality and the principles of, you know, the facts of this conflict. Now, to your point, Piers, about what should they do about Hamas, I reject the premise of Israel's genocide. I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, Hamas is a terrorist organization and they need to be eradicated. Of course, that's not true. And I think that we can both agree.
What do you mean that's not true?
It's an impossible task. It's not true that something needs to be done about Hamas. I don't agree with that framework and the parameters of that debate.
Why?
Because Israel's been committing ethnic cleansing and genocidal policies against the Palestinians for 70
But Hamas
plus
literally
years.
has
and
a
as
charter.
I reiterated
but
before,
Abby, hang on. Hamas literally has a stated charter of the elimination of Israel. That is the purest personification of a publicly stated policy of genocide
that's not
I can
true,
imagine.
That's not true. Their revised charter says that they actually recognize the existence of the Israeli state among 1967 borders. That's the revised charter. And they actually make a political differentiation between Zionism and Judaism.
So
that's
when
the
their
actual
official
charter of
spokesman,
Hamas. So you keep pointing to a random spokesperson. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's not a random. He's the official spokesman for Hamas. Mm-hmm. And he said literally 2 weeks after October the 7th, we are going to do this again and again and again. That is an existential genocidal threat to the existence of everyone in Israel. Clearly. Said publicly on camera. He's brazen about it.
Look, I think that when you're comparing one guy and his statement to literally
He's the official
dozens of
spokesman, Abby.
genocidal statements. Okay, but look at the official spokespeople of Israel, Piers, and look at the actual genocide they're committing. You cannot compare the two. It's a complete false equivalency. One guy is saying one thing, the other dozens of Israeli ministers and cabinet officials and public media personas on TV are saying one thing and actually doing it on the ground.
You would allow Hamas to stay in power?
On the ground. It's not up to me, Piers. Hamas is representative of a large sector.
You've been expressing many opinions.
But here's the thing.
What's your opinion?
Marwan Barghouti is the most popular unifying figure in Palestinian society. He would resoundingly win in an election against Hamas. So what this is about, this isn't about Hamas. This is about eliminating every faction of Palestinian resistance, peaceful or not. It is not about Hamas.
It's all about what Hamas did on October the 7th.
But Piers, I think we both know it's not. Because what is the military occupation founded upon? When did Hamas come into power? We know that this isn't just about Hamas. What was Israel doing in the West Bank the year prior to October 7th? They killed 500 Palestinians, 80 children. This is ethnic cleansing. This is a military occupation. As long as you have these policies in place, you will never get to the root of the violence, Piers.
Abby Martin unleashes a verbal storm, accusing Israel of ethnic cleansing and demolishing the narrative of self-defense. She claims Hamas's revised charter isn't genocidal, but ignores its unchanged 1988 call for Israel's destruction. Is Abby cherry-picking facts to support her argument, or providing necessary context often overlooked in mainstream discourse? Her failure to condemn Hamas while highlighting Israel's atrocities is a one-sided narrative reeking of bias.
There was an allegation there that you think all Muslims are terrorists. What's your response to what Abby Martin said?
Well, this is Abby's desperate attempt to discredit me. I am a man of the field. I fought against Hamas as part of legitimate intelligence organization, against savage group that were targeting civilians in suicide bombing attacks, waves of suicide bombing attacks that they killed people indiscriminately. So Abby today want me for some reason to apologize for saving human life because my truth challenges her convenient truth. Abby does not have the authority. She's just a self-appointed low-grade journalist. How can you be a journalist and you call this a genocide, ethnic cleansing? And she just keep repeating ethnic cleansing, genocide, colonialism, etc. None of it is real, including Palestine. It's only in your head. None of it is existential. Palestine was never born. How can you free it? It was never there. It's just a colonial entity, and some people choose to make it into a national identity. And this parrot has been just repeating Hamas propaganda. Marwan Barghouti that she's talking about him, she never met him. I knew Marwan before he got to power. He's a criminal. He killed 5 people. He has blood on his hands. He cheated on his wife. He has a secret son that he never revealed it to the public. Of course, I can criticize him, and I can criticize all the criminals that I know personally. She's been there only for a visit, and maybe she had some falafel sandwich, and she really was blown away of the Palestinian experience. There is no such a thing as Palestine. It's about time to retire, find a different job. You're not a journalist. You don't qualify even to be a mother.
Wow. Abby.
Mosab, it's usually a public figure. If they were caught lying about half the things that they said, they would be completely discredited and never allowed airtime. You are spewing such ahistorical anti-Arab bigotry that not even the fringe of Israeli society would agree with you. I mean, not even Israeli historians agree.
I'm not anti-Arab. I am Arab. I am Arab. This is my ethnicity. Islam is just
anti-Muslim bigotry.
I am not a Muslim.
Mosab.
We are Arabs.
Mosab. Okay. Then anti-Muslim bigotry, which is frankly appalling considering that there's 1 billion people on the planet who would be characterized as you as, extremists who need to be used force against, according to you. But Mosab, not even Israeli historians would agree with the fact that you claim that there's no military occupation in the West Bank, that there's no apartheid state. Israelis at least admit, yes, those things exist, but here's why they're necessary and justified. They don't even agree with you. You're so fringe that I don't even know where you're coming from. I mean, so again, if we can't even agree with the basic facts of the conflict and the reality in front of our eyes, I don't know how we can really even discuss this.
Mossab?
Yeah, because you don't qualify.
Well, I think
It's
the
as
belittling
simple
her
as that.
credentials. Listen,
Well,
everyone's entitled to an opinion.
Listen.
Youssef exposes Barghouti as a convicted murderer of 5 and a person of low character, and calls Abby a Hamas parrot, claiming that she's just repeating propaganda. Abby tortures Youssef's credibility, branding him an anti-Arab bigot. She claims he'd label 1 billion Muslims extremists. UN recognizes Palestine, but Youssef denies its very existence, screaming colonial entity. Abby highlights that even Israeli acknowledges the West Bank occupation.
Best case scenario, if there is an occupation, it's between Israel and Jordan, or it's between Israel and Egypt, because it was not an occupation of a country called Palestine. There was never Palestine in history. This is not an absurd statement, it's reality. Palestine never exists. There was not a country, it was not a nation, it's not an ethnic group. We are Arabs. We are the Arabs of Judea and Samaria. And when I was born, like millions of Palestinians, we had Jordanian birth certificate. The people of Gaza were Egyptian with Egyptian birth certificate. There was no Palestine. Yasser Arafat created this entity, and everybody believed him. And this lie must die. This is why I don't like what Abby and her likes doing by trying to delegitimize Israel. She's trying to discredit me. Who gave you the authority? How dare you?
You are a
I'm
spy.
son of that region.
You're
I'm
a spy
child
for
of that
Israeli
conflict.
intelligence,
You don't.
Mosab.
It is not funny. It's not funny. Your tale,
It's
your
not
false
funny at
narrative
all.
need to
It's-
stop because
it's
you
not
are
funny at all,
creating chaos.
Mosab.
Listen, Abby, you are bringing
Mosab, you're
chaos to the
very-
United States, and you will be held accountable. You are just a
Okay.
criminal like them.
Sure. Okay, Mosab, you can't be taken seriously, and you're not legitimate because you are literally, you have
I
worked
don't
for
care if
Israeli
you take me
intelligence to out
seriously
your
or
own
not.
people. But listen,
Sooner
okay, but
or
Mosab,
later
you
you
can't discredit
realize.
my reality as well. You can't discredit my reality as well. I was in the West Bank. I had assault rifles
Then
pointed at
don't
my head from a
dare you.
17-year-old
Don't dare you
American
try
from
to
Palo
discredit
Alto.
me. You
That's an occupation.
are in my domain
Mosab.
right
That's
now.
a military occupation.
Okay, you are in my domain. When you come to my domain, you have to pay respect. You have to respect all the effort that I put to save human lives, and you cannot reduce that into some propaganda because
why
it's
on
not.
earth would I
It's not
respect you
about
for
Israel.
putting
It's
the
about
leader of Fatah, Mosab? You put the most unifying, popular Palestinian figure. You are credited to putting him in prison. This is someone who would win an election against Hamas. He is a peace activist. He was fighting for a two-state solution. This isn't about Hamas, and you know it. This is about you shutting down, tamping down on all factions of Palestinian society. And let's be clear, what is Palestine supposed to do? What are Palestinians supposed to do when in 2018, thousands of Palestinians in Gaza marched peacefully to this fortified perimeter fence that Israeli snipers have authorized themselves to shoot to kill? And that's exactly what they did. They massacred over 200 peaceful demonstrators, medics, press, journalists, clearly marked press, disabled people in wheelchairs, and children. These are all violations of international law and the Geneva Convention. Israeli snipers perched up behind sand dunes picked people off one by one in a methodical slaughter over the course of several months. That's when Palestinians tried to peacefully protest. So I think the question should be, what should Palestinians do? Because they're not even allowed to advocate for their legal rights. They're not even allowed to raise up a Palestinian flag. I visited a place called Sebastia in the occupied West Bank, and Palestinians were shot and in the hospital for simply erecting a Palestinian flag on a hilltop several days prior. This is the brutal reality of military occupation in the West Bank.
Youssef detonates history, claiming Palestine never existed. Abby scorches his credibility, branding him an Israeli puppet. He claims Palestinians are mere Jordanians or Egyptians, obliterating their identity. Abby counters by highlighting Barghouti's unifying power and influence, and condemns the 2018 Gaza massacre, where 189 Palestinians, including 35 children, were killed. This is beyond just occupation, it's annihilation. Both of them hold on to their one-sided narratives and fail to see that the truth is somewhere in between.
I want the violence to end. I empathize with the victims of both sides of this.
Do
And
you?
that's why I want to get to the root of the conflict. Yes, I don't go out there and say Jews can't be trusted like you say about Muslims. I empathize with all civilian life. I believe
Then
and cherish the sanctity of human life. And that's why I want to get to the root of why violence occurs, Mosab. And
let me ask Mosab a question. Do you agree with the principle that Palestinians should be entitled to exactly the same human rights as Israelis?
Listen, the suffering of the Arabians, again, stop calling them Palestinians. They are not Palestinians. We are Arabs. We are the Arabs of Judea and Samaria. And Israel and the Jewish people have no problem
Palestinians call themselves
since the beginning
Palestinians
of their state. Well, you gave them that name. You forced the international community and the rest of the world.
All right, well, let me rephrase the question. Should
the
people who live in Gaza and on the West Bank, should they be entitled to the same human rights as Israelis?
If they have equal responsibility as the decent citizens of the State of Israel, that includes Arabs, Jews, Christians, and all other citizens of the State of Israel, then yes, they have equal rights. But if they are not taking their responsibility, if they are using violence, sending suicide bombers, and killing babies, kidnapping a 1-year-old, you know, how do you answer to the mother and to the mothers of the hostages and all those who got killed on October 7? You know, it's very easy to just try to delegitimize Israel. This is what Abby and her likes have been trying to do for so long. But they don't have the moral power to say what Hamas did, all the waves of suicide bombing attacks. October 7, that was a genocide. That was a genocide. So stop spreading the false narrative. Now, regarding to the Arabs who live there, they need a decent police force. They need a good economy. They need good education. And if they are able to integrate, then naturally could be a political entity based on their needs. But right now, when she say Palestine, who is? Islamic Jihad, Fatah, Marwan Barghouthi, Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas, Public Front. They are so conflicted. They don't have agenda. They don't have leadership. They don't have legitimacy. This is an anarchy that has been going on for about 70 years. And it's about time for it to stop. Now, to transform, to integrate the society, we must protect the children. And this is a priority number one before we talk about Palestinian state or whatever name you want to give it. That when we have a savage group, Islamists, by the name of Allah, hijacking and using children as human shields, their own children, after killing Jewish children, then this is a capital crime. We cannot blind our eyes. We have to deal with priorities. First, we remove this savage group out of power.
Abby and Yusuf's characterization of Hamas's and Israel's actions as genocide is particularly charged. While the term has been used by both sides in this conflict, its application is highly contested. The UN Genocide Convention defines genocide as acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Does the October 7 attack, as horrific as it was, and Israel's retaliation, as tragic the consequences were, meet this definition?
If Abby's intention were pro-peace, then this is our intention, that we should unify our efforts toward this main goal, first goal, priorities. Then after that, we can talk about the future and this criminal you call Marwan Barghouthi in Israeli prison.
How are you supposed to differentiate who is and who is not Hamas when Israeli authorities have literally called almost every entity in Gazan society Hamas, including UNRWA? They even are calling students on college campuses Hamas. I mean, there's summary executions of doctors thrown in mass graves because they're called Hamas. So I'm sorry that this label has been rendered completely meaningless. And as far as the term human shields, look, there's been no evidence, according to Amnesty International, during Cast-led and the 2014 onslaught and today, I mean, there is absolutely no evidence provided that Hamas uses human shields and that somehow justifies this heinous slaughter of predominantly women and children in Gaza. And even if they were literally standing behind hostages, you still can't just kill hundreds of people in a single airstrike because a Hamas commander is right there. And that's exactly what Israel is admittedly doing. Through AI, they're saying that they could kill up to 100 civilians for every Hamas official. It's absolutely outlandish.
But if a group like Hamas launches a terrorist attack on Israel that kills 1,200 people, they take over 200 more people hostage, including babies and Holocaust survivors, that is a declaration of war, which they knew would lead to the kind of response we've seen from Israel. And Israel would argue, and they would have some sound argument to this, that if someone declares war on you in that manner and you respond, and in eliminating the terrorists who committed that heinous crime, civilian casualties are incurred, they would say that that is exactly what has happened in any other war in history. That the principle is the same, that the civilian loss of life is appalling, but that the principle of retaliating against a body of people who have committed one of the worst terror attacks in living memory, that is why they're doing it.
Piers, there's no symmetry between the two sides. It's complete asymmetrical mass slaughter of women and kids. You know that.
Well,
and
actually,
you could also
Hamas
make the
did
same
commit a
argument
mass
for what
slaughter
preempted.
of women and kids. They did.
But,
you said there's no symmetry.
Piers,
there's an absolute symmetry.
But there's no symmetry. There's no symmetry between an occupying, colonizing force and the people that they're occupying and colonizing. You could obviously make the same argument that preempted October 7th, that it was a declaration of war to siege Gaza, to prevent aid from getting in, to shoot people that stray too far out, that are fishing, that can't go get medical aid and are sentenced to death within Gaza. Is that not a declaration of war? Is it not a declaration of war to violate international law, to maintain a brutal fascist military dictatorship in the West Bank? These all preempted October 7th. So it just keeps going back and back to what is the root of actual violence, Piers.
Abiy demolishes Israel's Hamas label, claiming its overusage has left it meaningless, while Youssef brands Barghouti a criminal, ignoring his peace potential. She blasts Israel's AI targeting, risking 100 civilian deaths per Hamas official, but is ignorant when it comes to the fact that the reason 2/3 of Palestine's 4,000 casualties is Hamas itself, their attack on Israel and usage of civilians as human shields, as reported by the UN.
Okay, Mosab, I'll give the last word to you. Where do we get peace from all this hell?
Listen, naturally, if the Israeli protocol is not sufficient and it's not satisfactory to the expectations of Abiy and many of her friends, then I say, how about we punish Hamas by their own laws, by the Islamic law? Why don't we follow the Islamic protocol? In this case, the Islamic law says, behead all men and take all women and children as booty. This is their moral stand. So she say it's asymmetric. Well, we already know that. It's a very dirty war. We are dealing with people with the mentality of the 7th century tribalism. It's not an easy mission for a democracy, for any country, for any modern army, for any civilized society to deal with this. So we need to be reasonable. I understand if people are anti-war and they are pro-children, pro-life, me too. But sometimes we have to make very difficult choices. And Israel was really pushed to the corner. Israel is fighting for its very existence. I am fighting for my very existence. I did not kill any Arab. I did not kill any of their tribesmen. But they want me to cease to exist. Why? Because I criticize their religion. I criticize their stupid ideas that are leading towards global chaos. And instead of spreading the narrative, the victim narrative, what we need to do actually, we need to localize it, not globalize it. And we need to be reasonable of our expectations from a democracy in the middle of crisis.
Mosab detonates dialogue with a barbaric proposal inspired by the war protocols of Islam. Behead all men, enslave the women and children. Is this a genuine proposal or an attempt to highlight the barbarism of Hamas? As he rightly pointed out, Hamas reeks of a 7th century tribalism mentality and has no place in the modern civilized era. They showed no mercy as they joyfully slaughtered men, women and children alike on October 7th. Maybe it's time they get a taste of their own medicine. Has this fierce exchange between Abi Martin and Yusuf Hassan shattered your preconceptions about the Israel-Palestine conflict? Are you seething at the alleged atrocities or grappling with the complexities of a situation where truth seems as foggy as the possibility piece? Don't let these provocative insights fade into the background noise of daily news. Share your thoughts, your outrage, your questions in the comments below, and don't forget to press the like and subscribe button while you're at it. Is there a path to reconciliation, or are we witnessing an irreconcilable clash of narratives and ideologies?